Hello, welcome. My name is Thomas Owen. I'm one of the department chairs here at Full Sail and Audio Production. I'd like to introduce Tom Todia. Tom Todia is a Full Sail grad from 1997, is currently a lead audio developer here in town Orlando at EA Tiburon. Tom is a good friend and is here to join us in our first audio production town hall. So this is a brand new set of, hopefully series of once a month getting together with all of the audio production students and trying to figure out, okay, what some different possibilities that the students have to gain some more information outside of their regular class. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's good to be here. I love being back on campus as often as I can and talking to students. When I went to school here, we had a lot of meetings with graduates and people in the field, and I always found it really helpful. So I'm glad I get to do my part now.
So can you give us a little background about yourself? Can you tell us what you've been doing since 1997, graduating here?
Yeah, since the dinosaur time. So I went to school here for recording arts, audio production, and I graduated in 1997. And I came to school here because I always wanted to work in a recording studio. That's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to make albums and record music and edit it and mix it and just be as close to it as possible, especially the technology of it. I love music and I love sound, but I also always loved the technology around high-end equipment. And rather than being able to afford it myself, I wanted to get paid to use it as often as I could. So I graduated in 1987 and I went and worked in recording studios for about the next almost 10 years, working on music, pop music, hip hop music, whatever the studio had at the time from various record labels. And I loved doing it. I absolutely loved doing it, but it wasn't something that I wanted to stick with permanently. I found myself really engaged with sound for movies and TV. And I did that for a few years as well. And then I kind of stumbled upon doing sound for games. And that was something I fell in love with quickly. I played games my whole life, still do. I'm an adult game nerd, and took a while for me to consider maybe I could do my sound production work in games, and decided to go ahead and give it a try. And when I started doing sound for games, just independently on my own, it was very difficult to get a hold of the software and any information. There were no tutorials. There was nobody really talking too much about it. It was a very cloistered world you had to join. So working from the outside in was not easy, but I found the whole process very, very fascinating because it was incredibly complicated to do back then. So I found getting anything accomplished very satisfying. And it was something I just went full bore with from there. You know, there are a lot of different avenues these days. Things have changed a lot. If anyone's gone through a game audio course yet, you're already learning some of that. But these days, the type of software and tools we use to actually make games at the professional level are fully available to people, sometimes free of charge with tutorials on how to use it. So the playing field has changed a lot. Getting into the industry now is much more approachable than it was when I started.
So when you started, what was the first game project that got you from working in the studio world to getting that bug that made you want to keep working and look towards games as a potential new career?
Sure, yeah. When I first got into sound for games, or when I wanted to get into it, I didn't know anything about it. I was playing a game called Unreal Tournament quite a lot, which is not around anymore, but Unreal Tournament was a very popular game in the 90s and early 2000s, and Unreal Tournament came with a level editor, like many other games did, where you could make your own level and put it on your server and let people play that online. And I started opening up their level editor and found that there was an area to play with sound in it. And there were no instructions on it, there were no information, no help menu, but I decided I wanted to hear a song of mine in the background of the game that I was playing, and I couldn't figure out how to put the song into the game, no matter what I tried. And I moved on to trying to recreate the sound of a plane that was in a different leveled game, and that took me actually about 6 weeks to just make the sound playback from the game world itself and actually hear it. And it was one of the most complicated things I ever figured out I just tried everything I could until I found it, and then I finally found it in some code and did it, and it was very satisfying, and I fell deeply in love with it and wanted to get better and better and better at it. So it started working on free mod sort of games, and then eventually moved into paid contracts and gigs from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where was that step? Who was the first person that you met that was developing games that you got to work with?
Yeah, so in our field, in all production fields really, but especially in game audio, networking is extremely important. You have to talk to people, you have to work with people, make connections. Going to school and graduating is step one, super important. Taking your classes, absorbing the material, getting good at that material, very important. But then you have to start branching out into your own projects. You have to find groups of people to get involved with. You have to find projects that need your skill set where you are currently, which is in the beginning. So you have to find other people that are at the beginning of graphics and coding, and work together to figure out how to accomplish something. There's also a lot of games right now, demo games, that you can get a hold of and recreate the sound of on your own if you don't have anyone else to work with. It shouldn't be a block to you getting the work done. But in the early stages of doing this, just like in music production, the most important thing right away is to develop some hard skills, because you can't go and find a job and find a career in something that you don't know that much about.
Right.
So the class is important. Right. Class is super important. That'll tell you whether or not you're really interested in it. And then after that, getting knee-deep in projects and tackling things that you haven't figured out yet will start to develop enough skills that you can confidently reach out to people for work.
But when you were in school, there wasn't a sound for games class.
No, there was no such thing back then.
So what kind of hard skills did you bring from your experience that were still applicable towards games at that time?
Right, yeah, that's a really good question, because in essence, when you are producing, recording, engineering, mixing, designing audio of any kind, 90% of it is really the same across all industries. We use the same workstations, the same types of microphones, the same recording techniques, processing in movies, in albums, and in games. They're actually very, very similar. How they operate and the final touches on how they communicate in their own realm is different, but if you spend enough time recording sound for music or for movies, you've got most of what you need to also be good at games. Then you have to start specializing into the tools and tech of games themselves. But when I started, it was all music that I was interested in. And after years of doing music, I realized what I was going to do in a game is the same thing, except instead of a song, it would be lasers and explosions and people screaming or whatever from there.
So our students in audio production have access to games to work on, and they have access to middleware tools to build in. How do you think that has changed the amount of knowledge you need coming into the industry? Is there a greater expectation to already have worked with this software and understand some of these techniques that you spent weeks and weeks working on with that first airplane?
Yeah, there is, definitely. You can get really far with just enthusiasm and the right sort of attitude and the right sort of people skills, but these days, with tools like Wise, which for anybody who doesn't know, it's the most popular game audio middleware tool. It's like kind of the Pro Tools of the game audio business. That tool is used by a large percentage of really, really high-end game companies out there. That tool is freely available. You can download it. You can build your own game, make games off their demo, and they have an entire process of tutorials and helpful hint guides to get you past the very beginning. And if you're going into an interview and there's 5 of you, and you're the one that knows more than everybody else about the tools and how it operates, you're in the best possible position to get that job.
So you talked a little bit about enthusiasm. You want to go into that a little more about the type of enthusiasm? What is an enthusiastic developer for sound design? What does that entail?
So, this goes for all forms of audio production, but being a representative of game audio now, and I do a lot of interviewing as the lead of our team. And what a lot of people don't seem to get at first, it's difficult to understand, is that we really care about the fact that you are passionate and enthusiastic about the topic. Because we work hard, we spend a lot of time together in the studio, and it's one thing to show that you have a set of skills and you have a demo that you can maybe show them of what you can do, but giving the team that you want to work for the impression that you are one of them is extremely important, that you are interested in the same things that we are. You want to complete this, you want to make a game, you are passionate about learning it, about getting really good at it, obviously also about making money. We just don't talk about that one as much. But when we interview people, and I have 5 or 6 people interviewing for the same position, the person that comes in with their eyes wide open and really gives us the sense that this is what they want to do for a living, that they've already done it a little bit, and they just need a chance to move forward and work around some experts, and they're going to absorb and learn and share and be really just thankful to be in that spot. If you can get that across to somebody in a social scenario of an interview, you're probably going to trigger the people in that room, because you're going to remind them of themselves when they started. And that's what we all want to see, that someone's ready to come in, and it's not just a job, it's something you're so connected to, you want to be, an audio Jedi. That's what we're all looking to do.
So do you have people come into your interviews that are just out of school, or are you seeing a lot of senior level developers? And I imagine there's a lot of competition for those spots.
For the senior level spots, there's a lot of competition, but it balances out. We interview a lot of people directly out of school. We really do. Now, in most media production fields, you have either an apprenticeship or an entry-level position. It's different in post-production, in music, and in games. In games, we don't really do internships. Right. In games, for the most part, we have a starting position as either a junior sound person or a contract position. And for those, we interview people directly out of school on a regular basis. Yeah.
So a student graduates, finishes up school, they've got their demo reel of a bunch of material ready to go, come talk to you. What makes their demo reel, or themselves, or maybe even not their demo reel, what makes one student or potential applicant stand out as maybe having that additional level of enthusiasm, or putting in a little more work than someone else? What catches your eye on that side?
There's a couple parts to being good at interviewing, or being prepared and ready for that interview. And a couple key points right away is knowing where you are. Right. Really important. If you're coming to interview at a particular studio, say ours, we make sports games at EA Tiburon. That's what we do. So you don't have to be a sports fanatic and know everything about every sport, but we want to get the impression you're interested in this world and this vibe. Knowing about our studio, reading up, how long have we been around? What do you know about us? When you walk in and give the team the impression, I know who you are and I know what you do and I've checked it out and I want to be part of this team. Not just that I'm applying to every team in the world, although you might be, but why are you here? Why do you want to be with us? Do you even like the work that we do? Do you know anything about it? Because if you're going into a media production job just because you want a job and a paycheck, obviously everybody does. We all want that. You can't live without it, and everybody deserves to be paid. But our field is not really just about a paycheck. It's about people that are really into what they do.
Sure.
And they want to get that sense. So if you walk in and you have a smile on your face, and you know what we do and who we are and the kind of work we produce, and you can talk to us about that, you're already in the top 50 percentile. Graduating is the first thing. If you've gone to school and you've shown the dedication to finish it and get your degree and get done, okay, you're the kind of person that finishes things. And if you walk in with that degree and a positive vibe and the impression that you know where you are and you want to be with that group, that's setting a really good example for the interview, definitely.
So for our students that come in loving to play games,
right?
Is it just the enthusiasm about playing games, or is there do you see some kind of difference in someone who really wants to create and be on a team?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Playing video games, that's really good. You need to be a video game player. I actually have some people that work with me that don't play games at all, or they don't anymore because they've gotten older and they don't care. All of us have a fundamental interest in games, and not just video games, board games, card games. If you're a gamer of any kind, you might be in the right field. But what we do is each day we are solving mini Rubik's Cubes. Our job is never the same thing. Every day there's a new challenge, there's a new something to untangle, figure out why something is broken, why it's not working exactly the way you designed it, and collaborating with other people on the team and being interested in solving problems. I am a problem-solving addict, and when I get to solve a problem and I know I'm the one that solved it, it is a rush of adrenaline and I love it.
Sure.
So I have a constant supply of little trophies I can give myself, and it's what I love about this field, and showing that level of interest in being a problem solver and wanting to learn and adapt. If you can get that across in an interview, you're really doing well. Because it is not repetitive. What we do is not repetitive at all. Even if you're working on the same game, it keeps constantly morphing right in front of you.
So what are some misconceptions that people that come to interview for you that have this, some idea that's a little skewed maybe on what they think working in games is like? What kind of misconceptions do students have coming into you?
I think quite often people get the idea that a really good game developer, a really good game team are people that have a game that's constantly functioning and working well. And what people that have never worked on a game, and you've worked on games before, so you know this, what people who don't work on games don't realize is that our world is basically broken 99% of the life of the game. And it's not until near the very end that you actually wrap everything up. And when people play the game, they probably don't realize that this thing has been on fire for the last several years with people working round the clock to get it done. And it's amusing too, because people will play your game and find one little thing in a menu or something that doesn't quite work right and just be furious. And you're like, is that all you found? Do you have any idea how many problems these games deal with? Because it's code, it's very complicated stuff. And it takes a lot of artists and audio developers and code magicians and marketing magicians and a large group of very talented people working together and dealing with that kind of stress to really get the product out to market. It's no small feat. Yeah.
So when you started working at EA, I know from knowing Tom personally, he'd worked for years and years and years doing contract audio work and working for smaller developers and also bigger companies.
Yeah.
You know, list even EA as a contractor or somewhere like Google or some other like larger experiences. So what's the difference? What's the difference between working as a contractor and working in-house at one of these studios?
Yeah, good question. In media production, and I say that because there's a lot of similar ties here between game audio and all other fields of media production, but there's a couple avenues for employment. One is you work at a large company or a small company in-house, so they pay you a paycheck and they take care of insurance and the regular job force. And then there are independent contractors who basically own and run their own business and get hired out to do individual projects. The difference is there is one person is kind of taking care of your salary and managing the business, and you just do the actual game audio development work. On the other side, you're a bit more of an owner. You have to handle your own taxes. You have to learn about your local state taxes, get yourself an accountant, get yourself a tax ID with your own incorporation, and obviously find clients as well. And a question I've had many times by many really bright young people getting into the industry is whether or not they should start their own business and go develop their own company or go work for a large company. The truth is most of us don't really choose that. It kind of happens because of what's in front of us. You can decide to start your own business and be an independent contractor, but if you're doing that, not only do you need the hard skills to be able to accomplish the work, but you have to be the kind of person that's going to go out and find clients and bring them to you. Whereas if you work in-house at a studio, the work is brought to you, but it's a different level of work as well. So, there's pluses and minuses to both. I wouldn't shut either one of them off. Everyone that I know that does game audio work at some point or another has done both of those, and sometimes back and forth. Sometimes you work at a company, and then for a few years you go independent, and then you go back to another company, and it all depends on the opportunities you have at that time. But things are great in the independent game world these days.
Right.
When I started, the independent game world was a place you could go and get your chops up, and nobody was going to sell the game, so it didn't matter, and it was just normal. These days, independent games are a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are
Yep.
people that make a game, 2 or 3 people on the team that makes $10–15 million, and they're giving the game away for free. So there's tremendous financial income now. It's also nerve-wracking because you are your own business. Something goes wrong, it's on you. But like everything else, the more risk there is in something, the more payoff there tends to be.
Right.
So when I got started, you worked on independent games because nobody would hire you until you were good enough and had some credits and experience. These days, you still can start in independent games to learn and get your chops, but you could make more money in independent games than working at Ubisoft or Activision or EA. It's completely possible. I know people that have done both.
So when you talk about getting your chops up,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different chops that go into this, aren't there?
Sure, yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the types of chops that you're looking for as a sound designer?
Yeah, as a
you're looking
sound
to build?
designer, when I'm hiring another sound designer, I'm looking for a number of things, but one is not just the ability to make a sound that sounds cool. That's one little part of it, and that's really important. But I know people that can make incredible sounds that don't have the aptitude for the rest of the work, and vice versa. So learning how to make sounds, learning how to use your ears critically, and also having an opinion is extremely important as a sound designer. Because what you do is a form of art. And granted, if you're going to make a gun that sounds like a laser, we have 30, 40 years of history to guide you along the way, through the evolvement of that type of sound. There's other sounds that you just have to invent from scratch, but you have to trust your own voice. You have to believe in what you're doing and be able to stand subjectively on your work and say, no, I do think that this is really good, and just because one person disagrees with me doesn't mean it's not. You can't be crippled by everyone's opinion all the time, because you never even know why someone is giving you feedback. They might be giving it because they're jealous of your content. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe they're giving you honest feedback. You have to have a certain amount of trust, but also it's really important for a sound designer to be open to critique. Some of us we're very emotional about what we make. It means a lot to me, almost like my family does, and I don't like my stuff being attacked. But at the same time, I'm surrounded by really smart, bright people, and if they have a valid opinion and critique of my work, you have to be open to that and accepting. Doesn't mean you should allow somebody to talk to you rudely or be insulting, but you have to understand in the work that we do, we are constantly updating and iterating on things. And if someone's on your team, their opinions are valid and important, and you should take them at least with a grain of salt.
Cool. Should we see if we have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do we have any questions? None yet?
Go good, then I can keep yapping.
Then you can keep yapping.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the student, they're looking at some different ways to build chops, and what kind of projects are the different kinds of early projects on, maybe before you've met some game developers, something that you could get your hands on and sort of learn some techniques that maybe can translate over to you?
Sure, yeah. In the early days, and by early days I mean maybe 20 years ago or so, I would have suggested something very different, but these days, because of the proliferation of tools, for instance, Wise, there are many tools out there that do this kind of work. I strongly recommend Wise, which is what is taught in the class, WWISE Wise, because it's the most popular tool. Companies use it all over the place. We were just talking about God of War earlier today.
Absolutely.
That team has their own tool at Sony that they developed, but they use Wise now as well. And the nice thing about a big ubiquitous tool like that is you have a lot of people coming in to interview that have also learned it. So they're not starting from the ground up. They've learned a little bit about the tool that you're using in-house. So it's a smart method for designing games. I always suggest people collaborate as much as possible. The most important thing is to collaborate with other people, because your own work in a vacuum is one thing, but being on a team of people and wrestling with those relationships and somehow getting to an end result together is really, really important. That being said, if you live somewhere where there's nobody around you doing the same kind of work, or you're having a hard time finding projects to collaborate with people, that shouldn't get in the way of you doing work. Something I always tell people is you should be working 7 days a week on what you do, even a little bit. If there's a whole month that goes by that you're not working on a project in your field, you're really missing out. You have to constantly be driving and picking up new things. And projects don't have to be a full game. You don't have to make a giant Grand Theft Auto game to do something impressive. Sometimes the most impressive stuff is getting a game engine and a tool like Wise and just figuring out how to make a door open and hear the sound of a door opening when you do it. If you can do that, you can expand that to all the other parts of the game tool. But focusing, I always tell people, if you're looking at the world of game audio from like way high up and you're looking at it from beginning to end, it's so overwhelming, it seems like something you would never learn. But if you just zoom into one thing, okay, I just need to figure out how to make this one sound play, and don't stop till you figure it out. And I want to figure out how to make that sound play and also trigger this other one sound. If you take it incrementally, one little piece at a time, before you know it, you start to see the pattern and similarity between all of these, and your learning gets faster and faster and faster all the time. So, you know, focus in on something realistic. You're not going to make Need for Speed from Home Alone. You know, but you might be able to figure out how to make this one weapon just make a sound when you push the mouse button. You can figure that out.
I know a lot of our students that get a little overwhelmed with the number of things that you can possibly learn with game audio.
Oh, sure.
They get a little overwhelmed with that, and some of them, ask, "Do I have to learn everything? Do I need to know implementation? Do I need to know coding? Do I need to know field recording?
Right.
Do I need to do dialogue?" The answer to that is a little complicated, isn't it?
It is that is complicated because everything depends on the situation. For me, I'm a junkie and I want to be an expert at everything related. I absolutely, and I'm not. I'm learning all the time, but I want to be. Learning enough to get yourself out of a corner is extremely important. And that's why I tell people work on projects that you find interesting. Because if you came up with the idea for the project and you're going to force yourself to figure out a way to solve what you need to solve to get that project done, you're going to see it through because you're actually interested in it. If I tell you I think you should go and remake the Madden game and you're not interested in sports or football at all, you're probably not going to finish it because you don't even find that interesting. But if you are a gamer and there's a type of game that you really love, start with that. Remake something that you find amazing and interesting. And maybe the first thing you need to do is make the sound of a car where you don't have any car sounds. Figure out a way to record the sound of a car. It doesn't have to be a $10,000 microphone and recording rig and a Lamborghini. You can work with what you have because it's the same thing. If I take an $80 microphone and record the sound of a Honda revving up as fast as I can and I make it work, that's no different than a high-end microphone and a Porsche. It's just a different level of what you're already doing. So doing it over and over and over again and experiencing it is the most important thing. And keeping your expectations realistic so that you can zone in and know where there's an end result. If you were to look at Wise for the first time and look at all the different menus and think, I'm not going to be good at this until I figure out what all of this does and how to use all of it creatively, that's beyond unrealistic. It makes sense. Smart people want to know everything. So I totally get the idea that you just want to be an expert before you can do anything, but you're going in reverse. Start very simple and just learn what you need to do to get through that, and eventually you will know every menu because you will have had to learn and touch them all.
Is that one of the things you're looking for when you have applicants? Someone to really dial in on what the sports title is that you're working on, and really dial in and say, to try to do something that's in line with what the company that you're working for, the studio that you're working for, is doing? Absolutely,
and it doesn't always happen that way, but for the most part, the best thing you can do when you graduate and you go to interview at a job or you apply for a job, knowing where you're going is super important, right? So, and I've had this before. I work on an NBA and a football game. And so when somebody sends me a demo from World of Warcraft where they redid magic sounds, I think, hey, that's really cool. Do you know who you sent this to? We don't make these games. This has no connection to what we do at all. And even if it's really good work, now you've shown me that you will haphazardly throw things out there and miss an opportunity. So, what would be better in that case would be to say, I don't have a demo relating to this, but I love what you guys do and I'd love to talk to you more about it. Yeah, fine. That's a perfectly honest approach to it. And we specialize. You don't have to specialize at first, but in the game audio business, we tend to specialize. There are people who just work on VO, like a movie. There are people who just do sound design. There are people who just implement the sounds that other people make. There are people who do all three of those because you're the only person on your team and you have to do it all. So it's all scalable. I've done lots and lots and lots of dialogue work on multiple mediums over the last 25 years, but I don't do dialogue work anymore. I have a team of people that do that, and I direct them, but I don't physically do that work anymore. I love doing implementation, and I do my own, but I have sound designers that work for me that don't touch the game engine necessarily because either A, they're always breaking it, and I'm sick of it, or they're just really, 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 really good at this one thing, and I hired them because that's what we need on the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have some questions.
Cool.
We have a question from Robbie. What kind of
Hello,
events would be the best to attend for networking? Are there specific game audio events?
Oh boy, yes, there are. Good question. Websites and events are both really important, right? So a physical event that you can get to is great. There's no better networking than meeting someone face to face and having a chat with them. A lot of my best clients and relationships have come down to me just going to an event and saying hi and following up with an email, and a year later they need my work. So there are events. There's a couple different things you can look up. There's the IGDA, International Game Developers Association. They're active in most of the 50 states in one way or the other. There are conventions that are very large that would be great to get to. They also can be a little bit pricey to do that, so you don't have to think of just the big expensive ones as the way to go. There are independent game development forums all over the place. Through ModDB is still around. There's still a number of those. If you Google search, you will find forums where people are making their own games. And I've actually had paying clients where all I did was go to a free website and people are talking about a game they're working on. And I've said, hey, I really like the idea for your game. I do sound. You should let me do sound for you. And we do something for free. And a year later, they get hired as a producer and have a budget. And they know me. So now they contact me about work that originally was free. You know, so events are great. There's so many. Look them up. Find game audio development events. Anytime you can get face-to-face with a group of people and build a rapport and let them know who you are, you're already in the top 50% of potential success right there. What are some ones that you guys recommend for school now?
I mean, here close to campus, we have an organization called Indienomicon that does local game audio meetups about once a month. Conventions, obviously the Game Developers Conference is the big one every year, but there's also ones like Game SoundCon.
Right, yeah.
Locally in town, we have Orlando IX, is another one that has some good networking opportunities.
Yeah.
And
those also keep in mind, Robbie, by the way, there are two different types of events. There are events you can go to like the Game Design Convention or Game SoundCon. They're very large, they're a little expensive to get to, but they're extremely valuable. But some of those events you're going to are sort of learning exercises for you and other audio developers, and not necessarily a place to just network for work itself. So think of it in two different ways. Think of where you can go to learn information with like-minded people, but also where can you go to put yourself in front of the kind of people that actually want to hire people to do what you do. And they're not always the same thing.
Yep.
I go to IGDA meetings all the time, and it's great, but when I'm there, I'm just around other game developers doing what I do, not necessarily around business clients or people looking to hire me. So, you want to develop hard skills, but also networking skills as well.
game jams as well.
Game jams is great. Most cities do a game jam at some point. And if you've never heard of this, a game jam is basically where people will get together in large numbers and break into teams and work on a game right then and there and just spend a day or two, 24, 48 hours, doing nothing but that game. It's basically camp for game development nerds. And that's an amazing networking opportunity. Even it might not seem like it is. Most people I know that work in games have done multiple game jams in their past. It's kind of a rite of passage. So I would definitely search those out. Your local community college might also know more about those. Yeah.
Any other questions?
We have another question for Devar. As a freelancer, being both employer and employee, what should I include or keep in mind when setting my rates?
Oh boy. Yeah, so quick thing there. Rates is one of the most controversial topics because there is no standard when it comes to rates. You just get that out of the way right now. We don't really tell each other what we charge on projects. We don't share that information. It's all very hush-hush for a variety of reasons. For one thing, there are projects I've done as a freelancer that I was so interested in, I was willing to get paid less than I wanted to because I just wanted to be involved. It really struck my interest. There have been other projects I've been involved with where I wanted more money than usual because they just sounded like no fun to me whatsoever, and I didn't even want to do it, but if you'll pay me this much, I will. And those can both be very interesting. At the end of the day, you have to figure out what your time is worth. You know, I never recommend to anybody to do work for free, but then again, you have to qualify what free means. If free means you are a skilled, experienced person and you don't have the time to work for free, that's one way to look at free. If you don't have any games that you've finished, if you don't have any credits, if you haven't collaborated with anybody, if you don't really know anybody, and a project comes along that has no money in it, but they want you to do work with them, well, that's a networking opportunity and that's a hard skill education opportunity, so that's not free. That's you learning and growing. So I've heard people say, for instance, never, ever, ever work for free. If I were to say that, I'd be lying. I've done many projects in the beginning of my career that were technically not paid, but I used them to learn and network. And then eventually you get to a point where, like, I'm not doing any work that isn't for money anymore. I've reached a different plateau. You know, so, but when it comes to being a freelance person, you have to get yourself an LLC or an S corporation incorporated in your state. Other people that will hire you from their company can only legally hire you if you have a taxable number. It's only about $150 or so a year in most states to be incorporated, and then you have the protection of that business. You want to read up on what it means to have an LLC of your own and what that entails, and it protects you that if your company were to be sued for whatever reason, I've never known anybody that's gone through that, but if you were to be in trouble, nobody could come and take away your personal assets or anything like that through a lawsuit. They could only go after the business itself, and then you get an accountant, and an accountant you speak to once a year around tax time, and they'll make sure you're handling your money correctly. For instance, I don't keep any money in my LLC, because if I were to get into trouble, there's money there to take. My LLC is just a way to receive money and turn it into income for myself as a tax write-off. That's it. But yeah, good question.
Good question.
That answered it.
We have another question from Robbie. What kind of projects would you recommend to start with? Or what type of genre of gaming would you recommend?
Oh, well, that's a big question. I mean, really, that comes down, I would start first with what you're most interested in. Because what you're interested in is what you're going to put your heart and soul into. You know, if all you're interested in is, you know, casual games, block-based games, if you really love that, if that's something that actually speaks to you, working on a game like God of War might not mean much. You know, it's the same thing for people I know who make music. If you make music, you want to work on the music that you like listening to because it means something to you. You're going to finish it, you're going to develop it, you're going to think of it late at night and rack your brain, and that's when good results happen. So start with what's interesting to you, but also start with what's realistic. If you're working from home, if you're just building a demo library and learning, there are some things that are just simply out of your reach. I remember speaking to someone a couple years ago that said, you know, I'm graduating soon, I've got this idea for a game, and he went on like a 5-minute explanation of this multi-world universe, online experience, and by the time he was done with it, I said, oh, you're gonna make this game? And he said, yeah. I was like, how on earth are you gonna make that? I can't make that game. That would take 500 people 10 years to make. You gotta shrink that down to something realistic you can get your hands on. But these days, there are enough demo projects out there that you can get that are space games, that are little quick racing games, that are little fighting games. Find something that you can get without spending money, because there's a lot of tools out there that the school is like helping push you into, and you can get and remake that game, and I definitely start there. Start simple and small, because otherwise you take on a project too big, and you don't finish it because you were never gonna finish it. It's too big, and then you get this idea, oh, I'm not capable of this. No, you just set your expectations in an insane range that nobody was gonna finish, not even an expert. You know, so think small. What's the first couple of steps you can do with what you have to make something creative that you find interesting?
One of the other things we tell our students a lot is if you don't have the source code to a game, well, take some gameplay footage that already exists.
Absolutely.
Go on your PlayStation, record some gameplay footage.
Yes, definitely.
Download it to your computer, bring it into Pro Tools, or bring it into Logic, and
Oh, yeah.
Try to redesign something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Get a demo reel project that you're interested in working on.
I get demo reels all the time that are just people recreating the sound of a trailer from a game that they loved. And it doesn't necessarily tell me that you can implement a game yet and do all the tech work behind it, but it does tell me that you can finish something and make something that sounds good, and that you have critical ears and that you're going to toil over it. That's super important. We've hired people at EA that haven't had any real implementation background other than what they learned in school, but they had the enthusiasm and the drive and the passion. You could see they really wanted to be with us, and they were completely open to learning everything that we're willing to teach them. And why you wouldn't want to do that blows my mind. Right. If I can go and work with a team that knows a lot more than me and get paid and have my eyes open and have them teach me new stuff, that's getting paid to get educated. So, it seems like that's what everyone should want. Not everybody does, but if you do, good for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
One more
Okay.
question.
From Devar, who do we reach out to within a company when looking to apply for a position creating assets or work with as an independent contractor?
Well, it depends on the company, but most large studios have a website and a jobs page on their website. Some of them even have their own aggregators, or a way for you to connect and get updates if a job comes open. There's also who does the is it a sound effect that does the game job postings all the time? If you go also onto Twitter, if you're not a Twitter user, sign up for Twitter, and you can find different pages and Twitter pages where all people do is list connections to game audio development as well. But different job sites, EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Blizzard, Bungie, Microsoft, all of these companies have a jobs page if you go to their website, and you can apply to them from there. And go ahead and apply for the job, and don't be afraid to reapply for it. I've had people apply for the same job 3 or 4 times and get it on the 5th time around. Just because it doesn't happen the first time doesn't mean it's over and they're not interested. Yeah. You just it might have been the wrong time for you, but come back and try again, and before you know it, people love perseverance. I love people that I can't shake, and eventually I realize they're going to do this. I might as well just let them in at this point, that says a lot about your character. But go right to their homepage.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for
Thank you
coming
for
out
having
again.
me. Thank you, Robbie and Duvall.
Thank you for everybody who's watching this on their computers. This is our first AP Town Hall event, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations yet to come once every month. We hope to have you back soon, Tom.
I hope so also. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody.